Welcome. This is Bleacher Blums, a sports podcast for baseball fans. Now here's David Tuttle and Astros master of banter, Blummer.
Here we go. It is another episode of Bleacher Blums. We have been splitting our time, working our way around the Blue Wire network. It was a lot of fun to be on a competitor or a teammate, whatever you want to call it, podcast with the Bronx Pinstripes. It was a lot of fun to talk. And I tell you what, Andrew knows his stuff over there on the Bronx Pinstripes podcast. And it was a lot of fun to talk to him. I usually feel like I'm prepared, but I feel like he was overly prepared and kind of put us in some tough situations, asking us some tough questions, which I actually enjoyed because being on the outside looking in and not having the most favorable opinion of what is going on with the New York Yankees, it was a lot of fun to get the insight and realize that there is a lot of turmoil over there. And I'm sure that didn't disappoint me or Tuttle. But Tuttle, man, how are you doing, dude?
Doing great, Blummer. And I agree. Yeah, it was great to be on Bronx Pinstripes. And I'm really excited that you felt the same way I did. I always felt like I was underprepared. I'm like, gosh, Blummer does this for a living. He gets on and he talks about the lineups and he knows the hitters. And, you know, we both have a relationship with Aaron. And I felt like, I felt the same way. I left that podcast going, man, I gotta get my stuff squared away, because he was like, well, if they fire the manager now and this guy went in and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It was really, it was nice to see how well prepared Andrew was. And as you said, it'll make me sharper moving forward, but it also gives you a different perspective. And so I enjoyed doing that this week, and it was like I said, it was eye-opening for me, and just another little feather in our cap, you know, on the Blue Wire network.
Yeah, absolutely. How about this? You know what? That was really the first time that, you know, you and I coming up in the same generation and knowing the same people in baseball. You know, having the White Sox in town, their coaching staff is interesting. I may talk about that a little bit later, but that was the first time I was ever like really called to the carpet about a friend in the business. And that's where I got kind of locked up a little bit was, oh my gosh, you know what? Aaron Boone is not just my friend. I thought it was cool he was a manager. And now I'm going, man, this guy's actually under some scrutiny up in New York, man. I never thought that would be a thing. And then to be confronted about it, I was like, what the? I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, no, I felt the exact same way, and you're probably a little closer with him. You know, I haven't talked to him in a little while, but it made me think of Dave Roberts more or less, and you're friends with him too. But how we end up being, I always go back to Bull Durham because I had that same experience. But it's like, hey, Crash, come in the office and shut the door. I got to talk to you, and it just made me realize that how not callous we get, but how we got used to that. You know, you got traded before. It was like, all right, you're getting on an airplane, you're going to this new city.
It's the business part.
So when he called us to, like you said, when you get called to the carpet, you have to be a little bit politically correct, or you have to think about how to say it. But I think, you know, Aaron and Dave and any of our friends in baseball that are working in baseball understand the business of it as well. And look at Gabe Kapler, who got fired, and it looked like everything was going haywire for him. And now he looks like, you know, looks like he's in the right career choice. AJ Hinch had the same experience, and we know these guys, and it almost is like, you know, pitchforks and, you know, guys storming the castle. Like, we got to get rid of this guy. Another team grabs him and they do well. So when I think about it in that perspective, it's kind of like, hey, this is a really tough place for Aaron to have his first managerial job. But if he got fired from the Yankees and he still wanted to manage, I feel like he could go to another team and do a good job. And so I think us being honest about what that dynamic is, we just don't know. You just don't know. I asked you last podcast about Phil Nevin and Aaron, and was it tough that Phil went out there and defended a guy and Aaron didn't get thrown out, and, you know, Phil did and all that? It's like, look, we honestly, as long as we've been around the game and as much as well as we know those guys, you just don't know the dynamic and what's going on. And you know, so I feel comfortable saying and answering questions how we did, but it was interesting to be called, like you said, kind of called to the carpet, if for lack of a better word.
It's like, how dare you ask me about Aaron Boone? He is my friend and he is doing a wonderful job.
Oh, but,
you know,
the Yankees are happy.
The Yankees are not happy. It's actually kind of astonishing. I'm glad you bring up the San Francisco Giants because, you know, this weekend that we're recording, you know, the Chicago White Sox are in town against the Houston Astros, which brings up its own unique dynamic when I'm calling games. But they have one of the best records in baseball, and come to find out, the San Francisco Giants are right at the top with them as far as one of the best records in baseball. You being a Giants fan and talking about Gabe Kapler, who, yes, we both know and have experience being around, are you shocked by what they're able to do? Because you could see them doing it for a month, but doing it for, 2.5, almost 3 months now, that's almost halfway through the season that these guys are leading the National League West.
I think I'm shocked like everybody else because of the, I guess the lack of name recognition. And honestly, I've been candid on this podcast about my lack
isn't good enough for you?
Hey, well, his grandfather was fantastic, but yeah, right there you go, name recognition.
Yeah.
He has it in spades. Aren't you related to? Yeah. So I just think. Yeah, no, I know you are. But I just think that I've been candid about I'm not a great scout, and you and I talk about analytics and eyeball test. And if you get into like a preseason roster and start going down rosters, we probably could have been a little bit more in tune to the fact that they have a good squad put together. Yeah. But I also think like a Brandon Belt, is probably playing kind of over what he normally does, maybe because he's in the right role. But they just, and we talked about on the Bronx Pinstripes podcast about the fact that they got Talkman. So, there are these little pieces that kind of come and go that you're not really sure about. But I would say I'm as surprised as anybody else just because they don't have that name recognition. And I think the teams that always end up being the favorites are obviously the Padres this year in the American League West because they have, three $300 million guys on their roster. You have the Dodgers who
$1 billion roster.
That's right. They have a $1 billion roster. The Yankees and the Red Sox always have a $1 billion roster. So you start looking at those types of teams, and they have to be the favorites. But I have always said this, I will go down with the ship saying this, and you know this very well, is being in a locker room is about chemistry. It's about, are we all rowing the boat in the same direction? And I think that's what I brought up on the Bronx Pinstripes podcast, is that you can get the best player at every position, but it's really how you put those Lego pieces or those puzzle pieces together. And I think that is the real key to a GM. And that's why that's why back to the White Sox, that's why I was actually worried about the White Sox, even though Tony La Russa told you, hey, I don't have to do a lot of managing. I just, I write the lineup card and these guys go out and do it, is that I thought he might upset that balance, because, the new school manager or the old school manager with new school players, I just think that chemistry and that support is really important. And I think that gets overlooked.
No, you're right. And going back to talking about managers and their impact on a team, not only can they get in there and do a good job like we saw with A.J. Hinch here with Houston when he was here, is he could galvanize those guys, but at the same time, you can have a manager that can separate himself from the team, and actually the team can rally around each other and create a better dynamic and go out and play hard despite the manager, or in spite of the manager. You can kind of play against him too and say, you know what, we're going to go out and rake no matter what this guy puts us in. So it kind of can work both ways, but it is definitely old school, new school, a lot going on. You talked about the National League West and talking about the Giants. I think the reason everybody discounted the Giants is because of the Padres and their payroll and the Dodgers and their payroll. And that kind of leads into the bulk of what we're going to talk about here on Bleacher Blums. Is Trevor Bauer is one of the guys who's been at the forefront of accusing, using, and talking about the sticky stuff, whether it be spider tack, rosin, sunscreen, pine tar, whatever your preference is in going out there and doing your business, creating spin rate or creating control. There was an interesting YouTube, interview that I just saw that was sent to us from our producer, Mark Ramos, who's doing a fantastic job. And I only say that because he's on here listening to us right now. But it was a great YouTube. And he was explaining to their pre and post game that, there should be something that they can use universally. And guess where you heard it first? Right here on Bleacher Blums, talking about a universal substance that players can use. And how about there is precedent for something being in use for pitchers to get a better grip. And it's always sitting behind the mound in a sanitary on the field for all of the world to see. It's rosin. How come we can't just get another substance to enhance the rosin and help these guys do it? So I'm kind of on the side of the pitcher, and I know that you are too, Tuttle, but any initial thoughts as far as some of the rulings that have come down, if you want to talk about it, because this midseason change seems one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard of. And, even in the NFL, the NBA, whatever rules they implement, I feel like the other leagues usually do it in the off season and gives the offseason an opportunity for guys to adjust, but doing it midseason is idiotic. And any other thoughts on what substances might be able to be used?
Yeah, I've said this a million times on our podcast, which is tell me what the rules are, and then I'll play by those rules. That's fine. I think you bring up an excellent point with that rosin bag. So now they're putting logos behind the mound, but that rosin bag's probably been sitting there since Satchel Paige was playing or Cy Young. I mean, the rosin bag has been back there. It's part of the game. It's always funny to watch the groundskeeper come out and throw it on there and poof. It's like LeBron
yeah.
before the game. That's right. You get that little poof. But I think, that to me shows that since the beginning of time, at least the beginning of baseball time, that they have been aware that, hey, we get sweaty and we need to have a better grip on the ball. I will keep hammering the point that since Major League Baseball purchased the baseballs in 2019 or 2019, right? They purchased Rawlings.
That was a huge spike in home runs.
That's right. So ever since they did that, we still need, the seams are lower, the ball's harder. It's a lot more like a golf ball. There are some things that we still need to do to grip the baseball. And so I will go down with the ship again, saying that those guys, hitters alike, yourself included, want the pitchers to have a good grip. Now, we did get into on the other podcast, Bronx Pinstripes, about spin rates and how high those are and what the logistics are. But back to your original point, they shouldn't be making this change mid-season. Tell me what the rules are. I'll play by those rules. And then, again, you did hear it here first. What's wrong with, hey, you guys bought the baseballs. Let's buy this spider tack company, or let's buy, a company, a sunscreen company, and have them,
license it, slap the label on it, and let's go. God.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's put that behind the mound now, right? You can actually put a logo on it, just like the basketball teams are now with a logo. So I think that's the best solution here. But tell me what the rules are. I'm going to play by those rules.
But I like the idea of actually having the whatever the substance is and putting it behind the mound. But I just think for Major League Baseball to go out there and implement a rule unilaterally during the middle of a season is incredible. It would, I don't know what to compare it to. I saw something online. It might've been on one of my Twitter threads. It said it would be like, them telling you, okay, no more can you use metal spikes on the baseball field. You have to go out there in tennis shoes. All of a sudden, everybody's slipping all over the place, making, injuries galore. You can't run fast. You can't do things. Mine was, if you're a guy who swings a bat that is 30 ounces because you want bat speed, what if Major League Baseball came in and said, hitters, you can no longer swing a light bat. You have to swing a 32-ounce bat and nothing less. That would completely alter a guy's ability to go out and play the game. And that's what's happening right now because Major League Baseball, who governs the game, has never enforced this rule unless it was blatantly obvious, like a Michael Pineda splotch of pine tar on the neck, or if it was Joe Niekro throwing an emery board out of his back pocket. There were some egregious moments where you were obviously trying to cheat and gain an advantage. Those guys were ejected. But otherwise, if you were able to be more discreet, you were able to go out and do that. And, that's why I'm not faulting the pitchers for going out there and doing it or saying they're doing it. It's just, this is like Tuttle just said, the rules, even though they're written, were not enforced. So that's what the players played under. And to change it midseason and say you're going to enforce a 10-game suspension, are you freaking kidding me? If you touch the back of a hitter, or if you pick up a bat and put it in the bat rack to be nice for the bat boy, all of a sudden you, as a pitcher, you've got pine tar in your hand and you get ejected for that. You got to be kidding me, man. This is what I mean by this could backfire on Major League Baseball. Is it changing midseason? Is not only dumb, but it proves that Manfred and this rules committee have absolutely no feel for what's going on in the game of play. And that's going to come back to haunt them in the CBA. Because if I get to the negotiating table and you start to throw things at me and you want to negotiate, I'm going to go, look at this dumbass move you made in the middle of a season. This proves to me that we know what's going on in the game and you don't.
Well, this is that dictatorship thing too, right? So the collective bargaining agreement's coming up, and now you're going to go say, "Oh, well, you guys, put down this rule, and this rule without consulting us." Where, as Garrett Cole, as foolish as he sounded 2 weeks ago, and now kind of as whiny as he sounded this week, he did make the point of, why aren't you talking to us? Talk to us about like why we're doing this and what we need to do to improve it. Let's have a committee. That's how most of these things get solved. And that was my point. That's what Mark texted me, and I forgot. he asked me about the 10-game suspension. But if you get suspended 10 games, I think they made it that way for starters, right? Because
Well,
the
it's similar
starters,
to
that
the
would be
injured
2
list for
starts, not 1
pitchers.
start.
The injured list for pitchers is 10 games.
Right.
Players is 15.
Right. But I'm just saying, because it would be 2 starts, not 1 start, instead of, oh yeah, he can just bump him 1 start, they had to extend it out to 10 games. But
Yeah.
but I texted back that it's logical consequences. That's how my mom raised us in our house. The consequences, they're still getting paid. It wasn't suspended without pay. It's suspended with pay.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, all right, well, great. Maybe I just, my arm's a little sore, a little tired. I'll go out there with like all kinds of stuff on my hat, like one of those little like twirly birds. Like, yeah, I've got gum here and stuff here, and they suspend you 10
Start
games.
doing the Gaylord Perry where you're touching everything.
That's right. Just, got everything everywhere. And then, all right, great. I'll get suspended 10 games, but I'll get my paycheck and I can, take an extra kind of a mid-season break. So
the caveat to that is, there's a potential managers get kicked out, or your catcher gets kicked out because the pine tar's coming from a shin guard, whatever. But they're talking about not allowing you to fill that roster spot either. So you're going to lose a roster spot or 2, which would be absolutely frightening for a 10-game series or a series of 10 games.
Yeah.
Because in baseball, when you're playing every day, so many things can happen, and you need those bodies to get through some of those games because you don't know how many days off you have. But, the rule implemented is just, it's insane to me to do it in the middle of the season.
Yeah, mid-season. And I will say this, so that you and I talked about this a little bit off air. So, as asinine as implementing the rule mid-season is, Tyler Glasnow was blaming the fact that he couldn't use substances in his last 2 starts on his injury. And I think that that's asinine as well.
It is. I think that blaming it on that is, the Tommy John, in all my experience, and I've had the chance to actually get on the field this week and talk to some people about, claims by pitchers and, and stuff like that. And I don't know who uses and who doesn't use, but when you hear Glasnow come out, obviously he trained with it and as functioning with it. But the fact that Tommy John is more of a wear and tear injury just kind of takes away from his idea that the not using the stickum to get a better grip led to him getting the UCL injury. And I thought there was a little bit of a flaw in that philosophy for me. And I don't want to be too harsh on the guy because he's probably hyper emotional, knowing that he's going on the injured list with a Tommy John injury that's going to keep him out for 9 to 12 months. But everybody I've talked to has always said that Tommy John is just a wear and tear type issue. It doesn't matter. I'm sure that maybe gripping the ball a little bit tighter because he didn't have the stickum led to maybe a little more stress and maybe sped up the process. But I think blaming the stickum for a Tommy John injury is a little ridiculous, or else there'd be 15 other guys out there with the injury right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. But I will say, to your point, and I made this on this podcast, we talked about bats before, right? Like, you used to get your box of bats, your 6 bats, and you take them out and you're like, this one feels good, this one doesn't feel good. It is such a feel sport. I mean, feeling of the baseball, feeling of the bat and the weight, that you have to believe, and this is why we're saying that this is insanity that they're implementing this in the middle of the year, is forget injuries and forget like how sticky the ball is and spin rates for a second. And let's talk about feel and how important. I mean, I used to look for a high seam. I was a sinker baller guy, and I would always try to have that high seam on my inside finger, right? Because I felt like I could pull the ball and move the ball in a much more effective way. Obviously, with no seams on the baseball, you're trying to add a little sticky or a little tack so that you can get that same feel for the baseball. But again, I feel like we're just beating a dead horse here, is that hitters want pitchers to know where the ball is going. And then you as a hitter want to be able to see this, like, whatever, true rotation or true spin on the ball. Mm-hmm. And as long as they're using the grip to do that, I think, again, we still have the same game of baseball. And I will kind of, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not saying, hey, steroids, we should legalize those and everybody can have steroids. But I remember 3 or 4 Olympics ago where they did the swimsuits, where they wore those full body swimsuits, and everybody was setting world records by 1.5 seconds and 2 seconds, which in that world is like, I mean, that's like hitting 600-foot home runs all of a sudden, right? It's like Major League Baseball buying Rawlings and having Brett Gardner go from 8 home runs to 27 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're changing the game, but you're changing it in a way where, hey, this is forward thinking and this is what we're going to want to do. So let's establish what the rules are again and let everybody play by those rules. I don't think, I almost think this is something that wasn't a huge issue. And then all of a sudden, when Joe West went out to the mound, all of a sudden Mike Schilt had a 9-minute press conference. All of a sudden, this is like, we need something to talk about. And this is, as baseball, typical baseball fashion, they have made this a topic that they don't want out. They don't want it out of the box. And now here we are talking about it every day, all day.
It's a panicked move. And they're like, oh, they're onto us. Let's do this. It's similar to the steroid era. We got to test everybody. We're testing everybody. We're testing for amphetamines. We're going to freak out and panic on that. And then they went, okay, the Yankees used a camera live time because replays implemented to get signs. Slap on the wrist. Okay, nobody will do it after that. The Red Sox use the Apple Watch. Oh, crap. It's starting to morph and evolve a little bit. Slap on the wrist. Okay, now we're going to institute a rule that anybody that does it's going to get crushed. And it ends up being the Astros the one that gets crushed. But that's kind of the progression or the evolution of this. And that's how it looks with this sticky stuff. Joe West stepped in and, sparked the fire. And now here we have with a panic move with a rule being instituted mid-season, like the sign stealing issue in 2017. Is it really going to stop guys from doing it? Or are guys going to continue to do it and see if they can get away with it, which I think will still happen? And to your point about changing the game, what gets lost in this is the approach from major league hitters. They're still uppercutting. They're not cutting down with 2 strikes. They're not trying to beat the shifts by going the other way. So it's kind of funny to me that, they juiced the ball in 19 and now they're taking away the sticky stuff to enhance offense, to put the ball in play a little bit more. And the numbers are actually dictating that the batting average is up, I think, about 15 points. The Astros are on an absolute home run tear right now. I don't know if that has to do with the lack of sticky stuff, but it's just funny to me that, Major League Baseball keeps messing with the game, like we said, without talking to the players and actually seeing what's going on. Because it's been kind of interesting to hear some players like Pete Alonso talk like I do, where use the spin. Use the command. Let me get in there and know that you're going to have the stuff that you're going to have on any given day. But what they're doing is just making no sense to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I said, tell me what the rules are. I do this in life as well. I told you my wife always thinks I'm too even keel. But when you have a professional sport that's 162 games long. This is not a 16-game season or like the NFL now, a 17-game season. The basketball season used to be 55 games and they made it 70 to stretch that out for more revenue. But I mean, 162 games, this is, so it's revenue, but it's a long season.
Yeah.
So you would think the decision-making process is the same. Like, hey, let's get a committee. Let's take this process slow and let's like brainstorm and let's think about a good solution. Nope. 162-game season. Boom. In 3 weeks, we've made it. Yeah. In 3 weeks, we've panicked and made a decision that we think is going to be, that's going to be the right one. And we know already that it's not having the desired effect and it's going to go haywire.
Yeah, and I want people to know too that the reason that pitchers are using the sticky stuff is because obviously it has, weather is a huge factor, whether it be cold and dry or you're a middle of summer in Atlanta where there's a lot of humidity and you've got sweaty palms and you need to figure out a way to get a grip instead of wiping your hand off every single pitch and hoping for the best. And another thing that a lot of people don't know at home is that when Major League Baseball actually has rules on how to rub up baseballs. The thing is, rubbing up the baseball is supposed to, create tack on the ball and take some of the shine off it and make it a little more abrasive so that you can get that grip. But these baseballs sometimes are rubbed up 24 to 48 hours before the game those baseballs are actually being used in. And guess what happens to mud when you let it sit in an arid environment? It dries out. And I've heard stories about guys who actually, and you know this, Tuttle, because, in the minor leagues, they're not rubbing them up like they do in the big leagues, but I've heard stories about pitchers in the big leagues will reach into a game bucket of balls that are going to be used that day. They will pick it up, and they could actually hold it in front of their face and blow on it and go, whew,
Yeah.
and their dust will come off the ball. So tell me how that's conducive to a pitcher going out there and trying to perform at his best ability. And, those rules need to be changed. Maybe you change the way the baseball is rubbed up, or how consistently it's rubbed up, or the timing of it being rubbed up, because I can't even imagine. It's one thing for the starter to deal with that. What if you're a closer coming in later in the game to shut out a tight game to win the division, and you're out there throwing this dusty rock around? I mean, that's insane to me.
Yeah, no, I've had that experience. I mean, this is not a new thing. I mean, we used to rub up balls. The clubhouse guy used to rub up the balls in the back, and then some people had a machine to do it. But as you said, I mean, that mud cakes on. It's like, think about your shoes. You walk through mud and the mud sticks to your shoe, and then 2 days later you go out in the garage and the mud that's on there, you just whack your shoes together and it all falls off. I mean, this isn't like the ideal substance, and they'll tell you, oh, well, we got the mud from the bayou of Louisiana, and this mud is great because it doesn't, it creates tack and it stays, wet longer or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I mean, each pitcher is going to rub up the ball and get a feel. I keep going back to the feel thing. Screw the analytics. Let's talk about the feel. Each guy wants the ball to feel a certain way, and they're going to rub it up and get it to kind of the feel that they're looking for. And I think, as we said already, since the beginning of time, at least the beginning of baseball time, since Abner Doubleday invented it, there's been a rosin bag on the mound so that guys can get a good grip on the ball.
Yep. It's all about grip, and we're getting a grip on this podcast right here. We have exhausted that sticky substance. We have been ahead of the curve. I have no problem patting ourselves on the back about that one, because we've had a great conversation about it. And I think that's going to do it, at least in this particular episode, because by the time we talk again, it is going to be instituted. I think it's June 21st is when they are actually going to start implementing these rules. So stay tuned for next podcast when we talk again about who's getting suspended, what's happening, how these guys are adjusting. So it'll be a lot of fun to figure that out. But for right now, we got a word from our sponsor.
All right. Thanks. That was a word from our sponsor. And Blummer, I just wanted to ask you this, because you played with Vladimir Guerrero, but I was looking at the home run leaders in the major leagues. And one of them was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The guy right behind him, or tied with him, is a guy named Fernando Tatis Jr. Too bad. I was just thinking, too bad you have 4 daughters, because, Geoff Blum Jr. might be able to and then it just made me look at the Blue Jays, right? They have Biggio and Bichette, and I was like, what is happening? I mean, I have 3 kids. I don't know if any of them are going to play professional sports, but is that an unusual thing? I mean, we talked about Yastrzemski earlier. I mean, what is happening? But the 2 home run leaders in Major League Baseball are sons of former big leaguers. What's happening?
Let's go next level. They're sons of ex big leaguers. They're also sons of ex big league teammates of yours truly.
Yeah.
I got to play with Fernando Tatis Jr. briefly when he was in Montreal, and might have been part of the reason why I got traded from Montreal to Houston to get me out of there. And then Vlad Jr. is obviously Vladimir Guerrero's son. And I played with Vladdy all the way from AA to the big leagues, and then 3 more years in the big leagues before I got traded away. So there's a lot of experience there. And one of the funniest stories I love telling is that it might have been 2 years ago. It was the 2019 spring training season. And the Toronto Blue Jays planned an exhibition game in Montreal against the Toronto Blue Jays and the Mets. And my wife and I don't know what happened. We went out to dinner. We didn't have the kids that night. So we went out to dinner, and we actually stopped by this bar to just have a post-meal drink and kind of enjoy the quiet time without the family and the chaos, and enjoy looking at each other and having that adult conversation.
You do not have to explain that to me. Like how when they do this, like on air, like just extend it. Like how many more drinks do we want? Let's pull in here.
Yeah, it is, because that's how it looks. You keep looking at each other. Are you ready to go home? No, I'm not ready to go home either. So we're sitting there, and there's a baseball game is on, and in between glancing at each other, we're watching the game, and we realize, they're playing in Montreal, and we start reminiscing about teams I played for and experiences we had in the city of Montreal. And as we're doing that, the lineup is posted on the screen on a graphic. And like Tuttle just said, I believe it was Biggio leading off, Bichette hitting second, Vlad Jr. hitting third, and it just started to go down the line. And we just kind of looked at it and went, oh my gosh, are we old? Because everybody's kids are now in the big leagues. And what's funny is is there's a photo floating around the internet of Vlad Jr. and Vlad Sr. tipping their cap on the field in Montreal, and I was actually there for that. So, that brought back that memory. But my wife, and I'm going to give my wife full credit for Vlad's success right now, because in the tunnels in Montreal, when the families would hang out together, guess who my wife was flipping big wiffle balls and stuff to, a young future star in Vlad Jr. with that big red wiffle ball bat.
Nice.
She's in the tunnel tossing it to him as he's blasting away. And, my wife's like, man, Vlad Jr. is going to be pretty good someday. And here we are talking about him being a potential Triple Crown winner, man.
Corey Blum missed her window. She could be the next scout. I mean, as long as you're scouting the sons of...
we should have asked for 10% back then.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Vlad, look, I promise I will throw... underhanded wiffle balls to your son every day in the tunnel if you just give me a little piece of his contract when he ends up going to the big leagues. So. That's great. Hey, how
does it make you feel? Do you think there is something about the bloodline in these guys to be able to get them to the big leagues? Because I think there's a little bit of talent, obviously, we'll say infused in these kids, just because we're trying to be family oriented. But there's also the mentality. That's with one thing I always thought about, and I still with my girls when they play volleyball, and you talked about this with your daughter in soccer, is the mentality of the game also for these guys. So they've kind of got an edge with the talent they've got and having, somebody who's experienced the big leagues.
It's funny because it'll has me circle back to Aaron again because, Aaron's dad, Bob, played in the big leagues for a long time.
Strong bloodline there.
Was a catcher at Stanford and then obviously an all-star catcher with the Phillies. And then Brett, his brother, played. And I just think by the time it got to Aaron... No.
Brett is not Brett. He's the Boone.
No, I know. I mean, I'm not going there. He's Ricky Henderson light. When Brett hits a ball, Brett hits it far. Yeah, I'm the Boone. Yeah, that's what he would tell you too.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that Boone bloodline, it made me think about it when I met. And their grandfather, by the way, played in the big leagues too. Yeah, Ray Boone. Forgot about that. So what I think is by the time it got to Aaron. And Aaron may admit this, maybe he wouldn't. I know he doesn't listen to the Bleacher Blums podcast because we're worried about him getting fired midseason. But the mentality for him, I don't think Aaron was as talented as Brett. And, Brett would certainly say that. But the mentality is exactly what you're talking about. And I think that was more apparent with Aaron than with any of the Boones that I met or saw play. And I think if you're scouting a guy, I mean, we talk about on this podcast all the time and why we got along. We started talking about how we approach life and raising kids. It's a grind, man. You just got to grind it out every day. And I think when you have that mentality from birth and you've seen it with your grandfather and your father and your
good point.
And so, I mean, and specifically back to Biggio and Bichette and Vladdy Jr., guess where they grew up, right? I mean, Vladdy Jr. was in the tunnel
in the clubhouse
when he was 2 or 3 years old. When the boys are allowed to go in, sometimes they don't let the girls go in there. They get scared. Guys walking around with no towels on. That's you can just have the boys come into the locker room and like you said, they get to see the camaraderie. They get to see the mentality. They get to see how hard their dad is working, driving the ball the other way in those under the stadium tunnels. So I do think if I were scouting, if the kid had a little above average talent, but he had that mentality, that would certainly raise him above some of the other guys. And I think that is what we see when those guys make the big leagues. But I will say that I do think it's a little bit of an unusual time. And maybe the unusual part is that they're all in the Blue Jays. Maybe the scout took the approach hey, look, if your dad played in the big leagues, I'm going to sign you.
I know.
I'm going to draft you and sign you. I don't know.
You're going to be a first round pick.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but I think it's cool. There's something to that too. I think, if you had, let's say that you are that scout and you've been scouting a couple of shortstops. One's Bo Bichette. The other one's just a good young ball player with the same skill set, has the same numbers. And if you put them next to each other and you say, here's player A, but player B has the similar skill set, but his dad played in the big leagues for 15 years. You may take the guy just because he's been around the game, may understand it a little bit better and understand that grind you're talking about, because that's something you really can't teach is how to function inside the game. And, even when you get to the big leagues, Michael Brantley is a veteran presence inside the Astros clubhouse. And guys who talk about Michael Brantley, whose dad, Mickey, played in the big leagues, they always talk about, what does it mean to have a veteran in your clubhouse? they help us get through a 162 game schedule. There is a different psyche in understanding how to get through that. So I think that bloodline and I think that ability to grow up in a clubhouse does give them a little bit of an edge. And how about the guy? I mean, it's one thing for the Blue Jays to draft, sons of big leaguers. Those guys are pretty damn good, man. Their offense is going to be a joke.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's why I was saying I don't want to just say, oh yeah, the scouts like looking at, big leaguer last names and drafting these guys. There's obviously some skill set and some ability there. And we don't want to overlook that. You know what's funny? You just triggered. I got to go back to the sticky substance rule. No, I'm kidding. Brantley, right? So he grew up his dad was a big leaguer, 162 games. Like he provides that even keel, like, hey, this is how we're going to grind it out through the season. Major League Baseball, as you said, their rules committee and anybody that's implementing this rule could learn from that. It's like, hey, let's take a deep breath. Like, let's sit back. Like, they should look at these guys because that's exactly how the veterans approach it. And you were in clubhouses like that. I mean, there's always that calming presence. The veteran guy, I mean, people used to talk about Larry Walker in a way like that. I mean, Maddox obviously was a goofball, but also had that an even keel mentality and just led by example because he didn't get too high or too low or panic during pressure situations.
No, I agree. It's a fun topic to talk about too, because it does bring up the lineage and you start talking about, oh, remember when Dante did this? Remember when Craig did that? Two of the three are Hall of Fame dads too, by the way.
Yeah.
That's another, entity that you have to deal with as far as being the young player and being the son of a Hall of Famer and being in the big leagues. Yeah. Because not only are you going to draw comparisons to your peers, you're going to draw comparisons to your dad.
Yeah.
Which may be a little unfair, but those guys are going out there and doing a phenomenal job. As far as not doing a phenomenal job, getting back in the National League West, have you been paying attention to what the Arizona Diamondbacks are doing right now?
Well, only in the last few days because I know they were playing the my lauded San Francisco Giants. I looked at one game; it was 7-0 Diamondbacks, and then I was like, "Ooh, and then I looked that night and I goes, oh, it's 8-5 in the 7th inning. That's great. And then this is so funny because I was not watching the game. I got on ESPN right before I went to bed and I was like, oh, bases loaded, 2 outs, bottom of the 9th or whatever. And I'm like, oh, 8-5. I go, it's not going to happen. Boom. And I woke up the next morning and it was 9-8. So if that is what you're referring to, and that's the way their season's going, that is not a good thread, I guess.
They have set a Major League Baseball record, losing last night 23 straight road games they have lost. The last time they won a road game, this is unbelievable. This may be the kiss of death. The last road game they won was against the Atlanta Braves. Madison Bumgarner was the pitcher, and it was the illegitimate no-hitter he threw against the Atlanta Braves. That was their last win on the road. They have now gone 23 straight road losses to set a Major League record, and that was April 25th. That is unbelievable. You know that the Baltimore Orioles are currently behind them, I think, with either 18 or 19 losses in a row. This is unreal.
It is unreal. But again, we talk about parity in the game, and the Orioles and the Diamondbacks, I mean, their payrolls are low, and they just I don't know. They don't seem to
tough divisions.
They don't seem to be getting after wins. That's right. American League East and National League West are the two better divisions in baseball typically. And, if the Yankees don't watch out, they're just going to hover right above the Orioles and say, hey, look, we beat the Orioles. And everyone's like, yeah, well, that's not going to sit well with anybody. Yeah. Hey, way to do that. Hey, I do have a question. I know we have, it's a podcast. We're not under a time crunch. Last night on your broadcast, I watched the end, and right towards the end, you guys were talking about how the Astros went 7-3 and they didn't gain any games on the A's because the A's are on fire. Yeah. But you guys said the A's have played the most home games, 43, and I think the next closest was 36 or 37. The weird thing is when the graphic was up, the A's have won 43 games and lost 27. Is that accurate? Is it they've played 43 home games and they have 43 wins? I know they haven't won all their home games, but I was just wondering, as you guys said that graphic.
No, that's accurate.
That's crazy. So that is
it is wild.
It's the perfect description. They've played 43 home games. They're 43 and 27, and they played 27 games on the road. I would assume based on my math. Which I mean,
I think that's it's close to 25 or 26 wins. Yeah, it is kind of funny how that did kind of match up. That's something we really didn't recognize because we were just floored at the fact that the Astros have been so good, yet the A's have been that much better. And the only way they gain ground on them is by them not playing last night. So they gain a half a game.
That's right.
But, the Astros going on this run that they're on, playing against the competition they're playing, you would expect, and, this is something we do every day in our prep is, you fill out the records, where they're at, how many games back, who's in the lead, where they're at in the division, and all of it. And it's like Groundhog Day when you fill out that line of your scorecard. You're like, well, the Astros won, so did the A's. And they don't gain any ground. It's absolutely obnoxious, but it's incredible to me, the Oakland A's and Bob Melvin. How is Bob Melvin not the manager of the year every single year? Because that guy, he is the absolute perfect example of Sisyphus. I mean, that boulder of an organization that he is continually pushing up the hill and never getting to the top is remarkable to me, and he just continues to win. He finds a way, whatever the personnel they give him, he finds a way to win. And they deserve to be at the top because they don't lose. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. And we've talked about this maybe last year, I believe, but it's just, he is Sisyphus. I mean, they're going to get into the playoffs as they always do, and then they just fall short. They don't have the superstars, like pitching and defense superstars. So we know that they might win a first round series and they just won't get beyond that. And he must be comfortable with that, or he just, like you said, wants to win with that group of guys. There was a fantastic article in The Athletic a couple months ago about Bob Melvin and the calming presence and the just the stability and the way he manages that's unique to baseball. And I think the thing that stood out to me is I remember, I think I told you this, but there's a guy that wasn't out of options. And so he basically called the guy and said, look, you're going to be our guy. You're going to be going back and forth from Sacramento to Oakland, consistently. Don't let it get you down. You're going to go down and you're going to get a start in AAA and then you're going to come back up. And he said the player said specifically, like, no manager had ever said that to him. It was always like, come in here, you're going down, come in there, you're going back up. And just that comment and just that support that you're going to be an integral part of our team, but you're just going to be on that shuttle and it's a business decision, has nothing to do with how you pitch down there or pitch up here. You're our guy, but you're going to go up and down. He said that made all the difference for him. And now I think he's a perennial big leaguer and was just really thankful for how Bob Melvin handled that.
How amazing is it to be honest with somebody? I mean, it goes so far, and as a player, if you know your defined role, guess what I'm going to do as a player? I'm going to be the best at that role.
That's right.
Because I know what you're expecting of me, and I know how to prepare for it now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It is. No, and it works in all relationships, and we've talked about that before. But
completely,
it's really hard to punish your kids when you don't tell them what the chores are. When you tell them what the chores are, and they do the chores, then hey, great. Now we have a communicative relationship, and if you don't do them, then there's some consequences to that. And I think that works for most relationships, professional, personal, and otherwise.
Yeah, it definitely it goes further than just baseball. Do you got anything else? What do you got?
Yeah, so
talk to me.
A short what'll Tuttle say. I would just say I would recommend Ted Lasso. If nobody's watched that show on Apple TV, I initially was not too keen on, watching Jason Sudeikis, who was a player on Saturday Night Live, do a character that seems so far-fetched, right? Taking a football coach in America and sending him over to Britain. But I just we talked about doing a book club or a TV show or a movie club here. I have watched season 2 got delayed a little bit because of COVID, but I just finished the first season of Ted Lasso. Season 2 comes out next month. I don't know if you've watched it, Blummer.
I'm about halfway through it.
Quite a good show, very entertaining, and he's like me. He's a super optimistic guy, and you almost think that
oh my gosh, he is you to a T.
Yeah, but he's like that aw shucks thing, and you're like, all right, this is gonna wear thin, and it doesn't wear thin. And and spoiler alert, sort of, right? The first season's been over for a year. He redoes the Allen Iverson practice speech.
We talking about practice, not a game.
He does it with one of his players.
Practice?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's great. He gets on one of his star players with the practice speech. I don't know if you've seen it, but I would just say, Bleacher Blum's listeners, please head out, watch Ted Lasso, and let me know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We may have to have just some episodes where we break down some of our favorite TV shows and movies and rank some of these things, maybe albums that you would listen the whole way through.
Ooh.
But Ted Lasso is pretty good, and if you gave Tuttle that Texan accent, that's basically who Ted Lasso is. Just hyper positive, never gets beat down. I am not. if there was the polar opposite of Ted Lasso, I might be that guy.
I don't know. You're pretty optimistic when we're on this podcast.
Yeah.
When I throw something at you, you'll nod along. You're like, oh, yeah. But maybe
you bring all the joy to me. You bring all the joy to the podcast. It rubs off.
There you go. Well, maybe right. You nod along, going, yeah. You nod along, going, that's the mentality I should have. Yeah. But I'll snap right when we're.
Yeah, I don't have much of a Blum's blast. My only question is, I haven't watched any of the NBA playoffs, and we haven't talked about golf in forever with the the U.S. Open going on in Torrey Pines at a golf course that I absolutely love and I've played several times, but.
Ooh.
The news that keeps jumping on into my mind, or I keep picking up on, and I need to do a little more research on. I tried reading an Athletic article about it today. Was in the NBA, Zion Williamson. I thought that he was an absolute freak when he played in college, and I still think he's a freak. And he's down in New Orleans, oddly enough, the same place that Anthony Davis kind of nurtured his career. Now he's a Laker, but. How do you not keep a guy like Zion happy? Are you that much of a mess of an organization that you can't keep a guy like Zion Williamson, who just plays with, an absolute joy for the game, and as good as he is? How is that guy unhappy, man? I don't get what goes on in the NBA that these guys get in these organizations where they just, they're basically like, screw it, I'm not happy. The organization is treating me. It's not even the organization is treating them. These guys want to win, I think, is what ultimately it comes down to. And they just don't surround them with a good enough supporting cast to really let these guys flourish. I don't know if you've kept up on it, but it was just something that kept kind of like piquing my interest throughout the course of the week as we watched some of the NBA finals, which I don't. But Zion Williamson's too good to be unhappy, man.
Yeah, but so there are a couple thoughts around that. So we just talked about the A's, the Oakland A's, and the fact that they'll kind of peter out. You have these payrolls and the chemistry. I mean, baseball and football are much more logistically challenged in terms of how you organize your roster. We've seen in basketball over the past few years, maybe it started with The Decision by LeBron,
Jesus.
But when you put LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Bosh on the same team, how good they can be. The Brooklyn Nets have kind of suffered in mediocrity, and then all of a sudden you have the Brooklyn Nets with Kevin Durant, James Harden.
The Golden State Warriors were one of those super teams.
That's exactly right, but they weren't a super team when I was growing up. They had Chris Mullin and Mitch Richmond, and they would just get knocked out. Run TMC.
They should have been.
Yeah. They could have been a little better, but I guess my point is, in basketball, you can manipulate your situation, right? Anthony Davis was going to go to the Lakers as soon as he decided. LeBron sent him a text, and now they're saying the same thing about Steph Curry, is that LeBron's like trying to get Steph Curry to think about, hey, maybe you could come join the Lakers too. I mean, the players have a lot more influence in that sport.
Are you kidding me with that?
No, I'm telling you, because he's going to be a free agent. He'll sign a max deal with Golden State. He won't leave. I'm just telling you, when you talk about this collusion stuff and baseball, and they're all these guys.
Dude, NBA's got the worst tampering. I mean, you talk about rules being broken. That's the worst.
And it's just 5 dudes on the floor, right? So LeBron can text anybody. I don't even know if that's under the tampering rules. You can just text his buddy, right? I mean, Chris Paul's been on 3 or 4 teams in the last 3 or 4 years. And now he's finally found a spot with the Suns as kind of the patriarch of that team. And now they're looking like, world beaters. So these guys can manipulate the team. There's parity in most sports. I don't really think there's a lot of parity in basketball. The parity is where do the 3 superstars want to go and make a name for themselves? And so what I think is, to answer your question, Zion looks like Anthony Davis. He sees Anthony Davis go, hey, I whined and cried and complained and I got my way out of here. If I can do that and go to a team, then I can make a difference there and I can win right away. So I think the players realize they have a lot more influence in the NBA than they would typically have.
Yeah. You got anything else, brother?
No, I don't.
All right. I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bleacher Blums. Of course, we always give a shout out at the end to all of the military out there, veterans who have served and those who are currently serving on our borders and across the world to protect our safety and give us the opportunity to talk a little smack on Bleacher Blums. And of course, frontline workers. I am now on the baseball field. I have been vaccinated. I am talking to actual physical players. Travel might be in my future. So all of the frontline workers, doctors, nurses, everybody that is included in that medical staff that keeps us healthy and enables us to fight through some of these pandemic type tragic situations. And of course, all of the the police officers, the EMTs, the firefighters, everybody that races into trouble to fix it for us and keep us safe. We appreciate you. And obviously, with us moving to the Blue Wire Network, we're trying to step our game up. So we appreciate Mark Ramos producing our episodes of Bleacher Blums. And of course, he is also a part of Ram Shirts and Crush City Tees. So the swag that you see on bleacherblums.com is courtesy of Mark Ramos. So we appreciate him peeling my dog out of the audio on this podcast to make us sound a little bit better. And, of course, producing the swag that we have on bleacherblums.com. But make sure you check that out on our website. You can get to Tuttle on Twitter and Instagram at RealDavidTuttle. And that you can also get to me on Twitter and Instagram going to @Blummer27. And I do believe we are on social media at Bleacher Blums. So that is something new. We are excited about that. Tuttle, I'm going to let you take it to the house because this is the end of the episode, man.
Thanks, man. And again, to kind of piggyback on the shout out to the military, I saw a bumper sticker this week that said, "Once a Marine, always a Marine." And it made me think of Ryan Spader, our man. Ace of Spader is a Marine. So once a Marine, always a Marine. Yep. Stay strong, my friend. Stay strong. The world is with
hang
you.
In their spades.
There you go. So wanted to give a shout out to him. And again, we always encourage you on the Bleacher Blums podcast every week and every day and every minute to get after it and believe.